The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 50,000 years. 12 ancient alien species sat at a massive table made of black crystal, deciding the fate of every civilization in the known galaxy. They believed themselves wise. They believed themselves just. They believed that they alone had the right to decide which species deserved to live and which ones needed to die. For thousands of years, they had watched young species rise from their home planets. Some were allowed to join the great galactic community. Others were deemed too dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Those species were eliminated before they could become a threat. The Council called this process cleansing. They had done it 17 times before. It was efficient. It was clean. It was, in their minds, necessary for the greater good of the galaxy. When their long-range sensors detected a strange energy signature coming from a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, the Council took notice. The humans of Earth had just achieved faster-than-light travel. Their first experimental ship had jumped across the void of space, and that jump had sent ripples across the galaxy that the Council's technology could detect. Chancellor Vormesh studied the data on the humans with growing concern. This species had a violent history. They had fought wars among themselves for thousands of years. They had weapons capable of destroying their own planet. And now they had reached for the stars. The Council debated for less than a day before reaching their decision. Admiral Vexter of the Zorani hegemony received his orders without question. He was a veteran of 3 previous cleansings. He knew his duty. His fleet of 200 warships departed for Earth within the hour. There would be no warnings. There would be no negotiations. There would be no mercy. Commander Daniel Harper woke up on a Tuesday morning feeling tired but content. He had been stationed on the orbital defense platform Sentinel-7 for 3 months now. The work was boring, mostly monitoring empty space and running routine system checks. But the pay was good, and he got to video call his wife Lisa and their 2 children every evening. They lived in Chicago, in a small house with a garden that Lisa loved to tend. Daniel was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started. Screaming, the first alien ships appeared without any warning. One moment the sensors showed empty space. The next moment, 200 massive warships materialized in orbit around Earth. They were unlike anything humans had ever seen. Each one was the size of a small city, covered in strange symbols and bristling with weapons that glowed with an eerie blue light. Daniel tried to send a warning to Earth Command, but the communications were jammed. He tried to reach Lisa, but the line was dead. All he could do was watch through the observation window as the alien fleet moved into position. The bombardment began exactly 12 minutes. After the ships arrived, beams of superheated plasma rained down from the sky. Beijing was the first city to fall. The ancient capital of China vanished in a column of fire that could be seen from space. Moscow was next, then New York, then London, then Tokyo. One by one, the great cities of Earth were wiped from existence. Daniel watched his home planet burn. Tears streamed down his face as he saw explosions bloom across the continents. He thought of Lisa. He thought of his daughter Emma, who was only 7 years old. He thought of his son Jake, who had just started kindergarten. He did not know if they were alive or dead. He could not reach them. He could only watch. The bombardment lasted for 6 hours. When it was finally over, the alien fleet simply turned and left. They did not land troops. They did not attempt to communicate. They had done what they came to do, and now they were leaving. 4 billion human beings died that day. The survivors emerged from bunkers and basements into a world that had been transformed into hell. The skies were choked with ash and smoke. The air was thick with radiation. Cities that had stood for centuries were now nothing but craters and rubble. Families had been torn apart. Children had lost their parents. Parents had lost their children. Daniel Harper was evacuated from Sentinel-7 3 days after the attack. He searched for Lisa and the children for weeks. He traveled to what remained of Chicago, walking through streets that were now rivers of melted glass and twisted metal. He found the neighborhood where his house had been. There was nothing left. No house, no garden, no family. He sat in the ashes and wept until he had no more tears to give. The Galactic Council monitored Earth for several weeks after the attack. They watched the survivors struggling to find food and water. They watched the desperate rescue efforts and the mass burials. They watched and they were satisfied. The humans would not recover from this. They would fade away, just like the 17 species before them. The threat had been eliminated. High Chancellor Vormesh closed the file on humanity and moved on to other matters. There were trade disputes to settle and resource allocations to approve. The cleansing of Earth was already being forgotten. It was just another entry in the Council's long history of maintaining galactic order. But the Council had made a terrible mistake. They had studied human history. They had seen the wars and the violence. But they had failed to understand something fundamental about the human spirit. They had failed to understand that humans did not break easily. They had failed to understand that humans were at their most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. In bunkers beneath mountains and in shelters deep underground, the survivors of Earth began to organize. They shared what little food they had. They treated each other's wounds. They buried their dead and mourned together. And slowly, quietly, they began to talk about revenge. Daniel Harper was among them. The man who had watched his planet burn and lost everything he loved did not give in to despair. Instead, something cold and hard took root in his heart. He looked at the other survivors and saw the same thing in their eyes. They had been shown no mercy. They would remember that. They would remember it for as long as they lived. The Council believed that humanity was finished. They were wrong. The ember of human civilization still burned, and that ember was about to become a fire that would consume the galaxy. The survivors did not know how yet. They did not know when. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. They would strike back. 5 years had passed since the day Earth burned. The Galactic Council had declared the human homeworld a quarantine zone and moved on with their business. In their official records, humanity was listed as extinct. Another successful cleansing. Another threat eliminated. The Council members slept peacefully, certain that the galaxy was safe from the violent species that had once called Earth home. They could not have been more wrong. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a network of bunkers that had been built during an earlier age of human paranoia, the survivors of Earth were very much alive. The bunkers had been designed to withstand nuclear war. They had survived the alien bombardment. And within their reinforced walls, humanity was rebuilding. General Kevin Price had never expected to lead anything important. Before the attack, he had been a logistics officer, spending his days managing supply chains and filling out paperwork. He was good at his job, but he was not a warrior. He was not a hero. He was just a man who knew how to organize things and solve problems. But the attack had killed most of Earth's military leadership. The generals and admirals who had trained for war their entire lives were gone, vaporized along with the cities they had been stationed in. Kevin had survived because his bunker was deep and his job was boring. Now he found himself in command of what remained of the United Earth Defense Force. He looked around the command center at the faces of his officers. They were tired. They were traumatized. Many of them had lost families and friends. But they were also determined. Kevin could see it in their eyes. These people were not going to give up. Dr. Nicole Shaw was the head of the Science Division. She was a quantum physicist who had spent her career studying theoretical concepts that most people could not even understand. Before the attack, she had led a team of brilliant researchers at a university that no longer existed. All of her colleagues were dead. Her husband was dead. Her parents were dead. She had survived because she had been presenting at a conference in Switzerland, in a facility built inside a mountain. Nicole rarely slept anymore. She spent 18 hours a day in her laboratory, surrounded by pieces of alien technology that had been recovered from crashed enemy vessels. Some of the alien ships had been damaged during the attack, brought down by desperate human defenders or simple mechanical failure. These wreckages were now the most valuable things on Earth. Kevin walked into her lab one evening and found her staring at a holographic display of an alien power core. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they burned with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "How is it going?" he asked. Nicole did not look away from the display. "Their technology is more advanced than ours, but it is not magic. It follows the same laws of physics. We can understand it. We can copy it. And then we can improve it." Kevin nodded. "How long?" 3 years. Maybe less if we push hard." They pushed hard. Every survivor with any scientific or engineering knowledge was recruited into the effort. Factories were built in hidden locations, in deep caves and abandoned mines. Materials were salvaged from the ruins of destroyed cities. People worked around the clock, driven by a shared purpose that transcended exhaustion and grief. The 800 million humans who had survived the attack were scattered across the planet. They lived in bunkers and underground shelters, in remote mountain villages and isolated islands. Communication between groups was difficult and dangerous, as the Council had left monitoring satellites in orbit. But slowly, carefully, a network was established. Commander Daniel Harper had become one of the key figures in this network. The man who had lost his family in Chicago had channeled his grief into action. He traveled between survivor communities, carrying messages and supplies, coordinating efforts, and recruiting people for the resistance. He had aged 10 years in the past 5. His hair had gone gray, and his face was lined with scars and sorrow. But his determination had never wavered. "They think we are dead," he told a gathering of survivors in an old mining tunnel. "They have forgotten about us. That is our greatest advantage. When we strike, they will not see it coming." The first human warship was completed in a hidden facility on the dark side of the moon. It was small compared to the alien vessels that had destroyed Earth, but it was fast and it was deadly. Nicole's team had not just copied the alien technology. They had combined it with human innovation in ways the Council had never imagined. Kevin stood on the bridge of the new ship and felt something he had not felt in 5 years. Hope. What should we call it? One of his officers asked. Kevin thought about all the cities that had been destroyed. He thought about the millions of people who had died in each one. He thought about Daniel Harper, still searching the ruins of Chicago for any trace of his family. "The Chicago," he said. "We will call it the Chicago." More ships followed. They were built in secret, hidden in asteroid belts and deep craters on Mars. Each one was named after a city that had been lost. The New York, the Beijing, the London, the Tokyo, a fleet of ghosts, crewed by survivors who had nothing left to lose. Nicole developed new weapons, new shields, new engines. Each improvement was immediately put into production. The human fleet grew stronger with every passing month. 5 years after the attack, humanity was ready. They had 57 warships, each one more advanced than anything the Council possessed. They had thousands of trained soldiers and pilots, hardened by loss and hungry for revenge. They had a plan. General Kevin Price addressed the fleet from the bridge of the Chicago. His voice was calm and steady, but everyone who heard it could feel the weight of what they were about to do. They thought they could murder our families, and we would simply accept it. They thought we would crawl into holes and die quietly. They were wrong. We have spent 5 years preparing for this moment. We have built ships. We have trained warriors. We have turned our grief into a weapon. Now it is time to show the galaxy that humanity will never be an easy victim. Now it is time to strike back. The fleet moved out from the shadow of Jupiter, heading toward Council space. The ghosts of Earth were going to war. Captain Ryan Mitchell had been a cargo pilot before the world ended. He had spent his days flying supplies between Earth and the lunar colonies. A simple job that paid well and let him see the stars. He had never fired a weapon in his life. He had never wanted to hurt anyone. That man was gone now. The Ryan Mitchell who stood on the bridge of the Chicago was someone different. He had lost his parents in the attack on Seattle. He had lost his sister in the chaos that followed. He had spent 5 years training for this moment, learning to fight, learning to kill, learning to hate. The cargo pilot was dead. In his place stood a warrior. His executive officer, Commander Megan Torres, stood beside him at the tactical display. Before the attack, she had been a school teacher in Arizona. She had taught history to middle school students, helping them understand the mistakes of the past. Now she was one of the deadliest tactical minds in the human fleet. She had studied every piece of information they had gathered about Council military tactics. She knew their patrol routes. She knew their weaknesses. She knew how to destroy them. First target is the Zerani supply station at the edge of Council space, Megan said, pointing at a blinking dot on the star map. It is lightly defended, mostly automated. The perfect place to test our capabilities. Ryan nodded. How many personnel? About 300. Mostly technicians and support staff. There was a time when that number would have troubled Ryan. 300 living beings. 300 individuals with families and hopes and dreams. But that was before. Now he felt nothing but cold determination. No survivors, he said. No distress signals. We hit hard and we hit fast. The Council cannot know we are coming. The attack on the supply station lasted exactly 11 minutes. The human ships came out of faster-than-light travel already firing. The station's defenses had no time to respond. Its shields were overwhelmed in seconds. Its communication arrays were destroyed before they could send a single message. When it was over, the supply station was a cloud of expanding debris. Not a single alien had escaped. Not a single signal had reached Council space. Ryan watched the destruction on his view screen and felt nothing but satisfaction. This was the beginning. Over the following months, the human ghost fleet struck again and again. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. Military outposts went silent. Scout vessels simply stopped reporting. The attacks were precise and brutal, leaving no survivors and no evidence. The Council was confused. They blamed pirates at first. Then they blamed internal conflicts between member species. They could not imagine that the species they had exterminated was hunting them. The very idea was impossible. The humans were dead. The record said so. Commander Adam Fletcher led a special operations team that specialized in the most dangerous missions. His unit was made up of soldiers who had lost everything in the attack. Men and women who had nothing to live for except revenge. They were fearless because they did not care if they survived. They only cared about making the Council pay. Adam's team captured a Council communications relay intact. It was a risky operation that required them to board an enemy vessel and kill everyone inside before they could trigger the POID, self-destruct. 3 of Adam's soldiers died in the assault. He added their names to the list he carried in his pocket, a list that grew longer with every mission. But the intelligence they gathered was worth the sacrifice. The communications relay contained the location of every major Council military installation. It contained patrol schedules and fleet deployments. It contained the names and positions of every council admiral and general. Kevin Price reviewed the intelligence in his command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. His face was grim, but his eyes were bright with anticipation. "This is it," he said. "This is everything we need." Dr. Nicole Shaw had not stopped working. Even as the fleet won victory after victory, she continued to improve their technology. Her latest creation was a weapon that could disable enemy shields with a single pulse. It was elegant and devastating. She presented it to Kevin with a tired smile. "The Council has never seen anything like this," she said. "Their ships will be helpless against it." Daniel Harper had joined the fleet as a communications officer. He spent his days coordinating attacks and relaying intelligence. At night, he lay in his bunk and thought about Lisa and the children. He wondered if they had suffered. He wondered if they had known what was happening. He hoped they had not. He hoped it had been quick. The Ghost Fleet grew bolder with each passing week. They began striking deeper into Council space, hitting targets that should have been safe. A shipyard here. A fuel depot there. Each attack sent ripples of fear through the Council's military. Rumors began to spread among the alien species. Whispers of human warships appearing out of nowhere and destroying everything in their path. Some dismissed these stories as fantasy. Others were not so sure. The attacks were too precise, too coordinated, too effective. Admiral Vexter, the Zerani commander who had led the attack on Earth, was the first Council leader to take the threat seriously. He reviewed the pattern of attacks and felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had seen this before. This was not the work of pirates or rival factions. This was systematic. This was methodical. This was revenge. He requested an emergency meeting with the High Chancellor, but his concerns were dismissed. The humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. The attacks must have some other explanation. Vexter returned to his quarters and poured himself a drink. His hands were shaking. He had been so certain that the humans would simply accept their fate. He had been so certain that they would break like all the others. He realized now that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not like the others. The humans did not break. And now they were coming for him. Captain Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Chicago as the fleet gathered for the next phase of their campaign. 57 ships hung in the darkness of space, their hulls painted black to match the void around them. Ghosts in the night. Avengers from a dead world. Next target? Megan asked. Ryan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The Zerani homeworld. It is time they feel what we felt. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed, vanishing into the darkness. The Ghost Fleet was rising, and nothing in the galaxy could stop them. High Chancellor Vormesh had not called an emergency session of the Galactic Council in 200 years. The last time had been during a civil war between two member species. That conflict had killed billions and nearly torn the Council apart. But even that crisis seemed small compared to what was happening now. The 12 Council members sat around the great black crystal table, their faces showing various expressions of fear and disbelief. On the holographic display before them, a map of Council space flickered with red markers. Each marker represented a destroyed installation or a missing fleet. There were hundreds of them. "This is impossible," said Ambassador Krell of the Montari Collective. His insectoid body trembled with agitation. "No force in the galaxy could do this. Not without us knowing. And yet it is happening," Vormesh replied. His voice was calm, but his tentacles coiled with barely suppressed anxiety. 17 supply stations destroyed. 42 patrol vessels missing. An entire fleet vanished near the Zerani border. We have no explanations. We have no suspects. We have nothing but ghosts. Admiral Vexter stood before the council, his scales pale with fear. He had requested this audience weeks ago. He had been ignored. Now the council was finally ready to listen. "I know who is doing this," he said. "It is the humans." Silence fell over the chamber. Then laughter. Several council members actually laughed at the idea. "The humans are extinct," said Representative Thal of the Vorthan Empire. "You led the cleansing yourself. Are you saying you failed?" Vexter felt anger rise in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. "I watched their cities burn. I was certain they were finished. But I have studied these attacks. The tactics, the technology, the complete lack of mercy. This is human work. I would stake my life on it." "You may have to," Vormesh said coldly. "If the humans somehow survived, it was your failure to eliminate them completely. You will lead the force to find and destroy them." Vexter bowed his head. He had known this was coming. He had known he would be blamed. But he also knew something the council did not want to accept. If the humans had truly survived, if they had built ships capable of doing this much damage, then the council was facing a threat unlike any it had encountered before. Lieutenant Katie Morgan was 26 years old. Before the attack, she had been a college student studying engineering. She had dreamed of designing spacecraft that would carry humanity to distant stars. She had been optimistic about the future. She had believed that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. Her brother had been in New York when it fell. His name was Chris. He had been 23 years old, just starting his career as a doctor. He had called her that morning to tell her about a patient he had helped save. She remembered his voice, full of excitement and pride. 4 hours later, he was dead. Katie carried his photograph in her flight suit, tucked into a pocket over her heart. She looked at it every day before a mission. It reminded her why she was fighting. It reminded her why she could not stop. She was the commander of a fighter squadron called the Black Widows. They were among the most skilled pilots in the human fleet, responsible for some of the most dangerous missions. Katie had personally destroyed more enemy vessels than she could count. She had become a legend among her fellow soldiers, a symbol of what human determination could achieve. The council attempted to negotiate. They sent diplomatic vessels to every location where human ships had been sighted. They broadcast messages of peace and reconciliation. They offered territories and resources in exchange for an end to hostilities. Each diplomatic vessel returned with the same message, written in the council's own language and transmitted on all frequencies. "You showed us no mercy. Expect none in return." Vormesh read the message and felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. Genuine, primal fear. The council had cleansed 17 species before humanity. Each time, the survivors had begged for mercy. Each time, they had accepted their fate. Each time, they had faded away into extinction, too broken and demoralized to fight back. But the humans were different. The humans did not beg. The humans did not accept. The humans burned with a rage that transcended logic and self-preservation. They were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to punish. General Kevin Price addressed the combined human fleet from the bridge of the Chicago. Behind him, the stars of council space soared across the viewport like scattered diamonds. Ahead of him, the greatest military force the council had ever assembled was preparing to defend the Zerani homeworld. "They are scared," Kevin said, his voice carrying to every ship in the fleet. "They have never faced an enemy like us. They have never fought a species that refused to break. They thought they could murder our families, burn our cities, and we would simply crawl away and die. They were wrong." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We are not here for territory. We are not here for resources. We are not here because we want to rule the galaxy. We are here because they tried to exterminate us. We are here because they showed us no mercy. We are here to teach them that humanity will never be an easy victim." Daniel Harper listened to the speech from his station on the command deck. He thought about Lisa. He thought about Emma and Jake. He thought about the house in Chicago with the garden that Lisa had loved. Tears ran down his face, but his hands were steady on his console. He was ready. "Today we begin the final campaign," Kevin continued. "Today we show the Council what happens when you try to destroy the human race. Today we strike back without mercy." The fleet surged forward, engines blazing, weapons hot. 57 ships crewed by survivors who had lost everything. 57 ships named after cities that had been erased from existence. The Chicago led the charge, its hull gleaming in the light of distant stars. The Council was about to learn the true cost of their actions. The humans were coming, and nothing in the galaxy could save them now. The Battle of Vormesh Prime began on a clear day in Council space. The skies above the capital world of the Zorani hegemony were filled with warships. Over 500 Council vessels had gathered to defend the planet, the largest fleet assembled in 3,000 years. Admiral Vexter commanded from his flagship. Watching the empty void of space and waiting for the enemy he knew was coming. He did not have to wait long. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 57 ships against 500. The Council commanders looked at their displays and felt a moment of relief. The humans were vastly outnumbered. Surely this would be an easy victory. That relief lasted exactly 30 seconds. Captain Ryan Mitchell gave the order from the bridge of the Chicago. "All ships, engage." The human vessels opened fire with weapons the Council had never seen before. Beams of concentrated energy sliced through shields as if they were paper. Missiles that could not be tracked or intercepted tore through hull plating. Ships that had been built to withstand years of combat were destroyed in moments. Commander Megan Torres coordinated the attack with cold precision. She had studied Council tactics for 5 years. She knew every weakness in their formations, every blind spot in their defenses, every mistake they would make. She exploited them all. 3rd Squadron, target their carrier group. 5th Squadron, flank left and take out their command ships. Chicago, we're going straight through the center. The human ships moved with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. They anticipated every Council maneuver. They countered every strategy. They fought as if they could see the future. Admiral Vexter watched his fleet crumble and felt despair unlike anything he had experienced before. His ships were being destroyed faster than he could track. His commanders were panicking, breaking formation, fleeing in all directions. The humans cut them down without hesitation. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "How are they doing this?" Dr. Nicole Shaw had given him the answer without knowing it. 5 years of work in her laboratory had produced technology that the Council could not match. 5 years of grief and determination had been channeled into weapons of terrible efficiency. The humans had not just rebuilt. They had surpassed. The battle lasted 6 days. On the first day, the humans destroyed half of the Council fleet. On the second day, they shattered the orbital defenses around the Zorani homeworld. On the third day, they began systematically eliminating every military installation in the system. By the 6th day, there was nothing left to fight. Lieutenant Katie Morgan flew her fighter through the debris of destroyed Council ships. Her squadron had performed brilliantly, taking down dozens of enemy vessels with precision strikes. She had lost 3 pilots, 3 friends who would never see Earth again. She added their names to the list in her heart, right next to her brother Chris. She landed in the hangar bay of the Chicago and sat in her cockpit for a long moment, breathing heavily. They had won. After everything, after all the loss and pain and rage, they had won. But victory felt hollow. It would not bring Chris back. It would not bring any of them back. Admiral Vexter was captured on the sixth day. His flagship had been disabled, not destroyed. The humans wanted him alive. They wanted him to face justice. General Kevin Price received the prisoner in the hangar bay of the Chicago. Vexter was brought before him in chains, his scales dull and his eyes empty. The alien who had ordered the destruction of Earth looked small and broken. Why? Vexter asked. Why did you not simply destroy us? You had the power. You could have wiped out our species as we tried to wipe out yours. Why did you spare us? Kevin looked at the alien for a long moment. He thought about Lisa Harper and her children, burned to ash in Chicago. He thought about Chris Morgan, vaporized in New York. He thought about the 4 billion human beings who had died because this alien had given an order. Because we are not you, Kevin said finally. We came here to end a threat, not to commit genocide. We wanted you to survive. We wanted you to remember. We wanted the entire galaxy to know what happens when you try to destroy the human race. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. But understand this. If any council species ever threatens humanity again, we will not show this mercy a second time. There will be no survivors. There will be no prisoners. There will be nothing left but dust and memories. This is your only warning. The Galactic Council was dissolved within a month of the battle. The 12 species that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years were forced to surrender their power. Their fleets were dismantled. Their leaders were tried for the crimes they had committed against humanity and the other species they had cleansed over the millennia. In place of the Council, a new alliance formed. The Galactic Federation was built on principles of equality and mutual respect. Every species had an equal voice. Every species had equal rights. And humanity held a permanent seat at the table. Not because they had conquered their enemies, but because they had proven that they could not be conquered. Commander Daniel Harper returned to Earth for the first time since the war began. He traveled to Chicago, to the place where his house had once stood. The crater was gone now, filled in and covered with green grass. A memorial garden had been built there, with the names of everyone who had died carved into white stone walls. He found Lisa's name. He found Emma's name. He found Jake's name. He stood before them and wept. We made them pay, he said softly. We made them remember what they did. And we built something better from the ashes. He placed 3 flowers at the base of the wall. Yellow roses, Lisa's favorite. Lieutenant Katie Morgan stood beside him. She had come to find her brother's name on a different wall, but she had seen Daniel standing alone and had walked over to join him. They did not speak. They did not need to. They understood each other perfectly. Across the galaxy, the message of humanity's victory spread from star to star. The species that had tried to exterminate them now looked to humans with fear and respect. The ghost fleet that had risen from the ashes of Earth had become legendary. Songs were sung about them. Stories were told, and in every corner of the galaxy, every species understood one simple truth. Humanity would never be an easy victim. Humanity would never break. Humanity would strike back without mercy, and nothing in the universe could stand against them. The galaxy would never forget.